Quiero introducir, si puedo, a Lady.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's session. We are glad that you are here. I am Lady Merce. I am the Executive Director of Centro Corazón de María. We are sponsored by RSHM, the Religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary, and we've been serving our community since 2002. We welcome our immigrants' families, and we provide education, we provide social services, emergency assistance, support, and advocacy. And we are here to serve you, and we're glad that you are here tonight because we are connected with all the other organizations to bring you information. Mi nombre es Lady Merced, soy la directora ejecutiva del Centro Corazón de María. Servimos a la comunidad del East End desde 2002 y estamos aquí para servirle. Proveemos servicios de educación, proveemos servicios sociales, asistencia de emergencia, apoyo, y estamos aquí para traerles a ustedes esta presentación con las otras organizaciones para que ustedes puedan informarse esta noche. Y entonces mi función esta noche va a ser de proveerles a ustedes la interpretación y les voy a explicar un poco de cómo hacerlo. We are going to live stream in English tonight. However, there is an interpretation mode, and I'm going to explain now how everyone can connect to the Spanish interpretation. Entonces, para poder llegar a la interpretación, busque en su pantalla, si usted lo está viendo desde el teléfono, va a haber 3 puntitos o 4 puntitos abajo de su pantalla, en la esquinita de su pantalla, donde dice More o dice Más. Cuando usted le da clic ahí, va a encontrar que dice Español o Inglés. Usted quiere darle la función que dice Español y va a darle Done o Iniciar, y ahí usted puede empezar escuchar la interpretación en español. También hay un globito pequeño que es como un mundo. Ahí usted le da clic, dice también interpretación, y puede conectarlo usted también ahí. Le da en español, le da iniciar o done, y ahí puede escucharnos. Así que disfruten la presentación de esta noche y bueno, estamos aquí para servirles.
Lady, gracias. Thank you, everyone. Again, welcome tonight. My name is Carlos Sandoval. I'll be your moderator. I'm a writer with a columnist with the East Hampton Press, the news group, and also a filmmaker. Thank you, Lady, for that great introduction and for all that you do and the work that Centro does. And thank you very much for doing double duty tonight.
Carlos, can we roll the video?
Oh, sure, sorry.
Este es un video para enseñarles cómo conectar a la opción de interpretación a través de Zoom. Una vez que entren a la llamada de Zoom, tendrán una pantalla parecida a esta, ¿cierto? Lo único que tienen que hacer para escoger la opción de español cuando esta está disponible van a apretar aquí en las opciones de abajo este último botón a mano derecha que dice More o Más. Son esos 3 puntitos, los van a presionar. Y cuando aparezcan esas opciones, escogen la opción de Language Interpretation y entonces escogen la opción de español, que aquí aparece en inglés como Spanish. Apretan Spanish, luego ponen Done o Finalizar y eso es todo. Ahora estarán escuchando la llamada de Zoom a través de la interpretación en español.
We're live. Good to go.
Okay. All right. Thank you again. Sorry about that. But welcome again, and thank you all. Gracias por reunirse con nosotros en español. Y ahora saben cómo hacerlo. For your convenience this evening, I want to say thank you so much for coming to this evening of information exchange and community resilience, which is dedicated to nuestro pueblo, our community, and to the friends who support us. For your convenience, we have a document listing links and resources. If you give me just a second, I'll see if I can get it up here. Why is this not moving here?
To the right.
Okay, there. That's Centro Corazón. Here we go. This is a link tree, and if you click on this, it should be up in our chat. You'll see that it's a great wealth of resources, and I highly recommend that you go to it. And please indulge me a little bit here because I am trying to both moderate and operate the Zoom call. Now, I think, there we go.
Okay.
I'd like to start this evening with acknowledgments and thanks. First, our thanks to LTV and your remarkable staff for this hybrid, simultaneously translated multimedia event that is allowing us to meet safely and warmly. Important tonight, warmly. The mind boggles that such a thing is possible these days. I also want to thank and acknowledge Isabel Sepúlveda de Scanlon for organizing this evening. Isabel, aplauso, aplauso, gracias. A couple of housekeeping notes. As a reminder, we will be taking your questions. Please type your question into the chat. For those here in the studio, their cards are being provided. Write down your question and they will be picked up. Note that we will be choosing among the most representative and most helpful of the questions. We may also consolidate several in the interest of time. During the evening, we'll be showing you some slides. Most will be available via the chat. If you missed something, don't worry. The session is being recorded and will be available via LTV YouTube live channel. The link that will appear, that link should appear several times during the course of this presentation. Now, if I may, a couple of personal words. This evening is meant for you, our beautiful pueblo, our community. We know there is a lot of fear because of President Trump's promised immigration crackdown. We're not going to lie. There's reason to be afraid. But there's also reason to hope, because knowledge is power. El saber es poder. That's why we are here this evening, to arm you with knowledge about how to help protect yourself and your family. We also want to let you know that you are not alone. There are a lot of people, services, and even laws on your side. We have a panel who will try to separate fact from fear and give you practical advice to navigate what's to come. We faced this before in 2017, during the first Trump administration. As Minerva can attest, we learned a lot of lessons that we will share. I would like to remind you that many of us, I would like to remind you that many of you have had to endure a lot to get here. To do that, you were strong because you had to be. I ask that you dig deep into yourself and find that strength again, not just for yourself, but for your children, for your neighbors, and for this whole beautiful seaside community we now all call home. Without you, this place would not be possible, and you should know that a lot of people recognize that and appreciate it. Appreciate you. With those words, gracias. And now, if I could begin tonight with our program in earnest, I would like to first introduce our keynote speaker, Jessica Greenberg, who we're very lucky to have with us today, especially given this weather. Jessica, you're going to have about 15 minutes, and please let me know when you want a slide to come up.
Sure. Let's start with slides.
Okay.
Right. Wonderful. My name is Jessica Greenberg. I'm the legal director at Corazon. We are a nonprofit organization serving the entire Long Island. We know that people are scared. We know that people are scared, and there's reason, unfortunately, to be scared. But we also know, and we have seen, that knowledge is power. Knowledge protects. So we're going to talk through, if you go to the next slide, we're going to talk through what to do if they're during ICE encounters. We're going to start with the most basic. What happens if ICE comes to your home? And ICE primarily does come to people's homes, and they do it very often early in the morning. Why? Because generally people are still at home at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Now you hear that knock on the door. What do? You don't open the door. We cannot emphasize that enough. Do not open the door. Of course, ask who it is. ICE may say it's the police. Press again. Show me your badge. The badge will say ICE or Department of Homeland Security. We know, of course, it's not the local police. ICE may say, oh, I can come into your home. I have a warrant. If you could, okay. If you could go to the next slide. Yeah. ICE will claim it has a warrant. It's only a warrant by name. It is not a warrant by power or any ability. It's a piece of paper. We're going to compare it to a judicial warrant, a legally binding warrant. It's a warrant that has been through a process. A judge has reviewed it. The evidence was provided, the judge reviewed it, and the judge said, oh, yeah, there's probable cause or whatever the basis may be, and we will let you enter the home or we will let you conduct the search. The warrant that ICE uses, again, it's a warrant only by name. It's a piece of paper that was signed by the agent's supervisor. It gives ICE as much power to enter your home as I would have. And I don't have any right to enter your home. And neither does ICE. They'll tell you otherwise. And if they say, we have a warrant, you have the right to see that warrant. Ask them to hold it up to the window, slide it under the door, ask to see it. It's going to be a warrant. It's going to be what we call an administrative warrant, an ICE warrant that gives them no power. If, for whatever reason, you do decide to step outside and speak to ICE, and people have made decisions, they do this for different reasons, we cannot caution enough that the door must be closed behind you. Why? An open door is an invitation. If you want to go to the next slide. An open door is an invitation. ICE will look. They will try to see who's inside. It's different than if they look through a window. An open door is an invitation. And if ICE sees other individuals in that home, they can and may take those individuals into custody. We call that, or they call it, a collateral arrest. It's people who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. The question that people ask very often is, what if ICE does take me into custody, or ICE does, tries to speak to me? What do I do? If you do have papers, whether it's something temporary like a work permit because you have temporary protected status, or a docket of production for childhood arrivals, or if you're a green card holder, or if you're a U.S. citizen, you show them those papers. If you are undocumented, you show them nothing. If you have a removal order or a deportation order, you certainly show them nothing. But you can't just ignore ICE. You can't just pretend that you don't hear them. You have to affirmatively say, I choose to remain silent. And you say that in the language that is best for you. ICE is required to have an interpreter with them if they do, of course, not speak the language. And many of the ICE officers or agents in the New York City field office, which covers Long Island, do speak Spanish. And so you say repeatedly, I choose to remain silent. I choose to remain silent. Importantly, also, we tell individuals, do not keep your passport on you unless you're a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. If you're undocumented, don't keep your passport on you. It's ICE's job to prove that you're not a U.S. citizen. If you have a passport from another country, that's pretty good proof. Of course, people have dual nationalities, but we know that generally if someone does present a passport from a different country, they are a citizen of that country and not a citizen of the United States. So you've done their job for you. Or you have done their job for them. You have shown them your passport, and you've shown them proof that you're not a U.S. citizen. The presumption will be that you're here without permission, that you're undocumented, and that you can then be taken into their custody. Don't do their job. ICE will try to engage in discussion with you. They're good at what they do. It's very similar to the interrogations that we see on TV, where the detectives will start to have a conversation, asking innocuous questions, your name, your date of birth. How are your kids? Do you have kids? Because that opens the door to more discussion. And anything you say to ICE can and will be used against you in court because they want information from you. Don't give it to them. Say repeatedly, I choose to remain silent. The next one is a bit obvious. Stay calm. Stay calm. The initial response may be to run. I get it. But if you are taken into custody, that could be a problem. Why? There are two types of custody in immigration, two types of detention in immigration. One is mandatory detention, the other is non-mandatory detention. And if you're held under what we call non-mandatory detention, you could be bonded out. One of the most important factors that they look at, by they, the judge, and of course the prosecuting attorney, ICE, one of the most important factors that they look at is whether or not you're a flight risk. If you take a step, if they think you're running or going to move or leave, you're a flight risk. You could be here for 20 years, have U.S. citizen children, have a wife, a husband, have a life here. If you try to leave, or they think that you're trying to leave, that's a problem. You may not be bonded out, or it may be an extraordinarily high bond. Next, ICE will give you lots of forms. They'll give you lots of papers and tell you to sign. Don't sign. What you are doing is signing away your right to have a hearing in the United States. Individuals, and there's some exceptions, cannot be deported or removed from the United States until a judge makes that decision. But you can sign away that right. And ICE is giving you those documents. Do not sign. Unless, of course, you do want to go home, because some people do get to that point where they just want to leave. But generally, most individuals do want to have their chance to go in front of a judge and say, Your Honor, I should remain in the United States. I should be allowed to stay here because of X, Y, and Z. And the judge will then issue the decision. And even if you do sign that right and you don't know what you're doing, it doesn't matter, you've signed. The last thing we recommend is taking action. What does that mean? The consulates will visit the detention facilities. Make sure that you speak to your consulate. They have a list of attorneys, and they'll help connect you. Whether or not that attorney will be able to represent you is a different story, but you need an attorney in this situation. I'm not saying that because I'm an attorney. I'm saying that because I see what happens. Immigration is so complicated. It is so unnecessarily complicated. It is virtually impossible to be able to understand, to be able to go through the system, the process by yourself. 90% of individuals who do have a deportation or removal order did so, or they were not represented. And there's really no difference between the people that we represent versus the individuals who don't have representation and do have that removal order. The only difference is an attorney. It's an incredibly complex system, and you just want someone there with you. We're going to transition into concerns that that individuals have had, understandably. But a step back for a moment, there's a concept called secure locations. Secure locations has been this age-old belief that there are certain places that a person should just not be arrested. We see that very often in with churches, dating back to the medieval times. A church was an asylum, a church was a sanctuary. It's not that individuals cannot be arrested in those locations, it was just deemed not to be the right or the humane thing. In immigration, that covered places of worship, schools, and hospitals. It has just been sacrosanct. You don't go into those locations, except for exigent circumstances, except for their emergencies. That was repealed. That was undone through executive order or through directives. ICE now has the ability to go into schools, has the ability to go into hospitals, it has the ability to go into churches, synagogues, masjids. It has the ability to go in. And that really scares people. These are safe places. An elementary school should not be a place that a child should be afraid to go. Fortunately, many superintendents agree with us, as does New York State. And they've produced a guidance of what to do in these situations. We want to make sure whether, again, it's a church, it's wherever it may be, at any location, any public location, any secure place, any safe place, that ICE cannot enter anywhere that is not a public space. In a school, the public space is the place between the front door and security. Anybody can go in there. You just may not be allowed to go to the next. You just may not be allowed in. Of course, we know that many religious houses of worship and hospitals do not have that same level of security, but it's the same idea. ICE cannot go into any places that are not public. Even a principal's office, they should not be escorted. Why? Because again, it's opening the door. You don't want them to even be able to come into the school. Another piece of that guidance is ensuring that the school district attorneys and the superintendents are involved in decision-making. Because again, it's do not let them in, do not let them in. It's no different than if you're in the home. If you're in a house of worship, or if you're in a hospital, locations that are generally private, like offices, hospital rooms, or anywhere else that's marked employee only, those are safe spaces, those are safe zones that ICE cannot enter without a judicial warrant. Again, a judicial warrant is one that's signed by a judge. It's one that there's been due process.
Okay, we done? Okay, sorry. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much for that very informative and detailed presentation. I do hope that we all listen to that, and we'll be coming back for questions to Jessica if you have specific questions. And right now, I'm sorry. Okay, you finished your presentation, right? Okay. Right now, what I'd like to do is open up the floor to our panelists here. But before we do that, I want to introduce them. And I think that we're all going to be visible in the long shot. Yes? Okay, thank you. The first I want to introduce is Tiffany Edvas. She is the president of the National Association of Puerto Rican Hispanic Social Workers. Tiffany, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for driving this long drive on this brutal night.
Your pleasure.
And then over to Tiffany's left is Minerva Bettis, Executive Director of HOLA Eastern Long Island. I referenced before that Minerva and I go back. We have many scars to show our experiences from 2016 and 17. And Minerva has done tremendous work with HOLA. I'm going to start by asking each of you a question, but other panelists should feel free to jump in. I want this to be very much, I think everyone wants it to be an interactive presentation dialogue. After we finish the panel's presentations, we're going to take questions from the audience. Audience, please don't forget to put your questions in the chat or write them on your cards. Y para esos que se han reunido con nosotros ahora, hay traducción simultánea. Si van al fondo de su pantalla, van a ver un botoncito que dice translation, creo que dice. Y empuje ahí y ya van a escuchar a Lady y su bella voz traduciéndonos al español. And panelists, please let me know when you want your slides to go up.
Sure.
Okay. But I'm going to start with Minerva, if I could. And Minerva, I would like you to tell us a bit more about HOLA and the services you provide. And then from there, what challenges HOLA is facing today. And I'm going to put up your slides.
Okay, thank you. I think I just have two. So maybe that first initial one that gives an idea of some of the work that we've been doing since 2002, so a little bit over 22 years. HOLA is a nonprofit, Latino-focused organization serving the East End town, which is 5 East End towns and the villages and hamlets within, which also comprises lots of siloed systems that on their face can work beautifully, and if there's any sort of challenge, can be extremely difficult to navigate. So we've got 23 school districts, we've got 10 court systems, and we've got 10 police departments. And it's a lot to navigate. And moments like this, and moments like 2016 to 2020, kind of showed that we have a lot more work to do. Certainly COVID showed that as well. So here we find ourselves right now in some difficult terrain, but the work that OLA has expanded out to do, a lot of it is a result of what we experienced in 2016 to 2020. We saw that the relationships that we needed to build with law enforcement directly so we could understand what works well in each of those departments, and to not just assume that their relationship with their own community members is one that is maybe not a good one, maybe it's a great one. The work that we developed there by doing Latino diversity trainings has been very important. Also, just deep understandings about the DNA, the hierarchy, what's important to that particular law enforcement agency, so that we don't boil it all down in moments like this when another agency comes in with a very different mission, such as ICE. It is another law enforcement agency, but it has a very different mission. And when that mission comes and tries to overlay itself over 10 East End police departments, reducing the very important trust and relationships that our local police department try to build, try to nurture, try to develop more bilingual and bicultural officers, work with local nonprofits. Having this overlay of another agency, law enforcement agency, reduce what our local law enforcement has been building and creating, not always perfectly, but none of us are perfect, is not good. It's not good for our community. So OLA works in a space where we want to keep reminding not only our local law enforcement regarding their policies, their procedures, and also our towns and villages that oversee our local law enforcement. What's different about the East End of Long Island is that our local law enforcement does not report to one commissioner within Suffolk County. They do not report to Suffolk County Police. They report to the towns and villages. The towns and villages report to you, the voters, you within communities who are connected to voters. The town and villages are responsible to you. The health, the welfare, the safety, that is the mission, and it should be the mission. And so right now we find ourselves, much as we did in 2016, 2020, just trying to navigate those spaces to make sure that we are having real conversations about what laws might be happening in executive order and what is important for us to maintain in terms of safety and order within our towns and villages that our local law enforcement and towns and villages have to be responsible to and accountable for. So law enforcement is one piece of what we do. Also the 10 courts. We have our team in court to make sure that we're monitoring landlord-tenant, sometimes traffic court, to make sure that those processes are going smoothly and people that need to have access to language, to interpretation have it, and that people that might need extra help, OLA can be there to support them through some of the difficult challenges they might be having. Many times we're addressing illegal evictions, illegal lockouts that have been crimes since 2019 but are not always enforced in that way. We just want to make sure that our Latinos and immigrant populations have as much access to the laws and to safety and protection as anyone else should. We also are working within 23 school districts, making sure that right now with some of the repeals of the secure locations, that each of our districts is standing up very strongly to show their parent base, their caregiver base, their students, how much they are willing to do to protect the safety and the privacy of their students and their families. And we've seen a lot of districts step forward. We think there's still more work to be done, so that's the space that OLA is working in right now, to be talking with our superintendents and making sure that whatever they can do to the very full extent of that to protect the safety and the privacy of their students and families, that they are doing, and that they are communicating that in whatever language necessary to their parents and their caregivers. Within that is also the work that we do with mental health. We did initiate something called Youth Connect, which is a way to connect adolescents from middle school all the way up through college who are struggling with mental and emotional health needs, maybe a crisis, maybe they're just having a really bad day, but the level of isolation that our youth have been feeling for a long time, before 2016, but my gosh, that really spiked it. And then we had COVID that spiked it even more, and here we are again. It is not healthy. You cannot sustain that. We already know all those things. So we have stepped in to have a helpline that runs 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., and we answer the texts, phone calls, or emails in Spanish and English. We go into schools, and we make our presentations there as well. Lastly, what Ola's focused in on are quite a few. We're doing Know Your Rights training. We're doing emergency planning. We're doing work with families for temporary designation of parental custody. And we also have an immigration team that does pro bono work. And you can imagine we are just almost tapped out, but we're looking to expand the work that we do to better serve our community as well. We are very happy and happy to be here and have partnerships across this panel and within our community at Long Island and even the greater New York area. So thank you, Isabel, for doing this, and thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Minerva. Thank Ola for all the tremendous work you're doing. Next, if I could turn to Jessica. Jessica, what sort of resources are available for immigrant families facing stress, trauma, and uncertainty? And I know that you specialize in this, so could you please tell us a bit about your work, your organization? I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you for the question. My name is Tiffany, and I'm, again, the president of the National Association of Puerto Rican Hispanic Social Workers. It's a pleasure to be a part of this panel with incredible organizations really doing the work of reaching into the community, empowering the community to know what their rights are and to be able to uphold their rights. Regardless of status, you are here and you have rights, you have a voice, and your voice matters, and render that appropriately. So in response to your question, Ola has spoken a little bit about the emergency family preparation, and we find knowing your rights comes with a lot of concern in general. It's a lot of information, there's a lot of links, there's a lot of resources, there's so many things out there of deciphering what's true and what's not. And I encourage you all, take part of this conversation, be present, ask questions. We'll have time for Q&A a little bit in a moment to ask a little bit more targeted questions, but take time to sit with this information. The recording will be available afterwards to be able to process and really understand in which areas in your home, in your workplace, in your school, where your rights can be extended. For the family planning and related to trauma and concern, the best piece that you can do, or the best thing that you can do to give yourself peace of mind, is to plan. What happens in the event that, right? And so Jessica had gone through various different scenarios and also mentioned the safe spaces where you may need to advocate for yourself again. Where's the documentation? Again, I do not wish to speak with you, right? You have your right to remain silent and uphold that. But in the event that families are separated and folks are taken in, then what is the plans that need to be put in place? Firstly, have this conversation between your family members. Have this conversation between your partners, your siblings, and your children. It's not an easy conversation, but like everything, it must be had. There are resources, and we have it in the Linktree, Know Your Rights Poder. We'll post it again in the chat so that you can have, of different ways that you can have this conversation with your children. Planning. Find out and speak to who you would name as 2 caregivers to take care of your children in the event that you're to take it into custody. Have those documents in writing. We have power of attorney documentation. There's a few other links in the Linktree as well to be able to put this plan in place. Finances, having those finances in order, saving for legal fees and bonds if that happens. Just being able to have a plan in place will give peace of mind that knowing whatever happens, you have people as a support in your community. Find a local agency to have a conversation with attorneys and figure out what solutions make sense for you. Collect all your documents, numbers that are important, your A numbers, your passports, have them all in a centralized location that your family members know that are in your household and that they stay there. In the event that something happens, they know exactly where to go. All those documents centralized. Again, Jessica had mentioned, if you have a passport that is not a U.S. passport, don't carry it with you. In addition, take a moment to realize your own resilience. Take a moment to realize that while this is a concerning moment in time and history, we have also been here before. There are agencies have been here, have known and do the work and are able to support you in any capacity. And so knowing that you can lean on them, lean on your family, lean on your friends, lean on your communities, know that you too can take control of what matters. And so much has been said. You'll see a lot of information on the news. You'll see a lot of information on Instagram and social medias. I encourage you all to disconnect, to detach as much as you can to protect your own peace of mind. Focusing on what you can control. That's number one, putting a plan in place, having a conversation with your family. And then 3, how do you self-regulate? In times where you may become anxious, you might see something triggering. How do you come back to center? If you can share one of my slides.
I think we have to go to central control to share slides now.
Yes. The first slide will be actually the emergency planning. But the slide shares with you an exercise that you can do at home, wherever you're at, when you're sitting down, using the tools that you have here, right? Your hands, to bring you to center. So there you go. Using your hands, take your right hand and hold it up. Take your other hand with your index finger, and this is a breathing exercise to regulate your breath. So the objective is to trace your hand. And every time you come up, you breathe in through your nose. Every time you come down, you breathe out through your mouth. And the objective is to go as slowly as you can as you trace your fingers, inhale and exhale, and back, inhale and exhale. Because when you scroll on the internet, when you hear concerning calls from your family members, you're thinking to yourself, what can I do? How can I help? How can I protect myself? Come back to your breath. In the moment that you might be questioned by ICE, questioned by a police officer, questioned by anybody, you might freeze and not know what to say. Again, look at your hands. Remember that you can control your breath right there in that moment to help you navigate with clarity what your next steps need to be. Again, what is your next step? You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to limit as much access before opening those doors. So I leave you with that in terms of resources. We have them in Spanish here as well. It's okay. You have all the tools that you need to control in the moment. And again, lean in on the supports that you have here.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Really appreciate it. And I think I could do it with a few deep breaths myself right now.
We all can.
Minerva, if I could turn to you right now. You spoke before about law enforcement and municipalities and holding them accountable. And I wondered if you could go a bit further into that and how we can do that, how we can hold them accountable.
Well, I do want to say that so many folks within our East End community have reached out to want to support, want to know what they can do, the same kind of question, and whether that might be someone who feels they have the strength and want to go to a town board meeting or go reach out and want to have a meeting with their own supervisor, the town board, or the police chief. That is definitely within your right to do that. You certainly do not have to have OLA be the one to do that. It is part of the work that we do. But you can do that on your own as well if you wanted to. What's important for us is that we don't feel that we should at this moment be accepting any kind of a generalized promise of, well, we're not, and we're talking with local law enforcement right now, and some are having different approaches, we're having some deeper conversations, which we do really appreciate, but a statement like, we're not going to ask you your immigration status if we detain you or stop you at a regular traffic stop. Well, that's already against the law. That's not telling us too much. It is absolutely against the law to be using administrative warrants. Again, it's already against the law. I do not look over at another county such as Nassau and say, well, gosh, well, look, that I'm not going to use that as a balance point. I refuse to. Because if we start doing that and we just go lower and lower and lower and saying, well, at least that's not happening, that's not how we live our lives. We have beautiful communities with amazing families and individuals who have been part of the structure of our communities for years, for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We've been growing our community so that we now have 50% Latino student body across 23 school districts. That didn't happen overnight. It wasn't an influx. It is our community. It is growth. It is beauty. It is vibrance, everything. So what we need to do right now is just don't just accept these words where people want to feel good about what's happening. So the moment they hear, these statements that are a little too generalized, a little too vague, it's okay to question that. And if you want to question that, you have a right to question that right to the top. And in our case, it could be the police chief, could be the town board, supervisor. For OLA, the kind of questions that we're asking are, what can we do to make sure that we're codifying this moment? So it's not just simply, hey, we're gonna do our best, we're not gonna do the bad things. Okay, but I want to know, what are you gonna do? How are we going to codify and document any sort of relationship that you might have with ICE, any request that ICE might have of you that you might deny or that you might approve? Because maybe in that moment that is something that is a judicial warrant. There should be a ledger, there should be documentation, there should be accountability, and it should not only be on the shoulders of police, because they might step into that space, because right now, what we're living in right now is leaning a lot on law enforcement. But what we have out here in our structure, what we can do, not just what we can't do, but what we can do is lean into our existing structure, which is that our towns and village oversee our law enforcement. Let them work together. Let's make sure that towns and villages hold and embrace and want that level of accountability so they don't just kind of pawn it off, because I don't think that's fair to law enforcement either, and we deserve communities that are working together for the safety, the peace, and the health of the entire community.
Thank you very much. We on the East End are very blessed to have a booming economy. It's really seasonal in many ways, but it's also very dependent on our migrant workers. I think there's a great deal of concern from the perspective of some businesses as to what they can do to help protect their employees. Can anyone here tackle that a little bit? I think, Tiffany, this is yours.
We could share it.
We could share it.
You start it, and I'll start it?
Go for it,
Okay. So one thing that we do, KYR, Know Your Rights. What we're adding on to that is an extra R. For businesses and business owners, know your rights and responsibilities as a business owner. So we're very happy to be going to a few different chambers of commerce and also working directly with businesses that might call us up. And behind it is not the assumption that these workers are all undocumented. The assumption is that all workers are documented. They're working with the Social Security, they're documented, they're ready to work, everything's great. But our economy is fueled in many cases by immigrant and out here very much Latino labor, Latino and Hispanic labor, which means that there are targets out here in different industries. And we want to make sure that any of the businesses that are running, that are lucky enough to have the labor that they have dedicated to them, are prepared to support and protect. They should know that they should put signs where the private areas are. So a restaurant, the parking lot might be public, but there are going to be other areas within the restaurant that are private, such as the kitchen or the basement or the office. And it's very important that all employees are trained on the same things that Jessica was talking about and that Tiffany was talking about, is that you do not have to freeze or then suddenly just open the door and say, yeah, come on in. You have to make sure that your employees and your management staff have their own emergency plan in place to know what happens should ICE come knocking at that door. It is your responsibility. It is also your right as a business owner, and you should be doing that. So we are offering those types of trainings and making sure that the information is being also explained out to their own staff so that their staffs can understand that they are taking these actions as well. So that's one area within business. Tiffany?
I'll also say for the folks in the audience who are allies and want to ask, like, what can they do to support? If you see an interaction occurring in front of you, it's important that you document that interaction. You record it on your phone. Also record sightings in terms of like height, build, car, license, ID numbers, to make sure that anything that was occurring in that interaction, it was legal in the way that it was done, and to be able to also for the family to recognize how to follow up on that case as well. So you, as allies, protect your community, right? Speak on behalf of a person who wants to remain silent, and also ask those questions. Do you have a warrant? Who, like, again, the less access that we allow for folks to get in is making it difficult, right? Is being able to ask those questions. Do you have a warrant? Can we see those warrants? What is your reason to be here, and how can we limit those access? And again, please use your privilege in those spaces on behalf of protecting the communities that are directly impacted.
Yes, Minerva.
I'd like to add one more thing to that, because I'm so glad you brought that up. That if you are seeing something, and you don't have to be the one to verify all that. If you feel that something's off and you are safe enough to take a photo, or even safe enough to take a video from a distance, you do not want to get in the middle of any action that's happening between law enforcement and somebody else. But documenting it, and also being able to write down in that moment, I'm on the corner of, so-and-so, so-and-so, it is this time, it is this date, this is what I've witnessed, and sending that in. I mean, we are also accepting information like that. There are other spaces that you can also share that kind of information. OLA is not going to be we're not going to be verifying every one of those things, but what is important for us in the East End, because we did see this in 2017, is that when someone had been apprehended and a family didn't know what happened to them, if we were the ones that had that image of the last time that person was seen, that was powerful enough to share with the family, to share with the lawyer, to make sure that we're working quickly. Because once those detentions happen, acting quickly is the key, and we often don't have everything that we need to do that. This is a great tool as well, and a great way to keep our community engaged in these kinds of moments, to let everyone else see that we're just not going to walk by like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble, I'm not sure what I could do. Do what you're comfortable to do, but you being there and documenting that and people seeing that is a pretty powerful thing to do.
Jessica, I see you nodding vigorously and affirmatively. Do you have something you might want to add to that?
It's just the importance of recording these interactions and these encounters. It is so important. It creates accountability because the officers know that you're there. In fact, they were given a memo to be camera ready at all times, to dress appropriately, because we all have cameras. We pull it out immediately. It helps so much as an attorney to be able to see what's going on, because sometimes it's not lawful.
Right.
Sometimes we can kind of find it's not even loopholes, it's not even holes. It's the law. We can file suppression motions, all these other things, to try to just mitigate it as much as we can. It is so important. But it's also important because it's helping us verify whether or not it actually was ICE. We have heard so many rumors that ICE is in this location, that location. Fortunately, Corazon has offices across Long Island, and we're able to send people to those locations to verify, because we hear about things very quickly. It's never actually been anything. But when we do have these videos, whether it's from a ring phone or the doorbell, or from someone recording, we're able to see that, yes, this happened. We're able to pick up trends. We're able to look at patterns in practice. And we're able to determine who may be most at risk. It is so incredibly important.
Thank you. I'm going to sort of break away or extend on that just a little bit, and actually move into a question that came up from an audience member that has to do with racial profiling. And I come to it because I am a documentary filmmaker, and I did a film about Arizona and its immigration, severe immigration laws. On the side aspect of that was racial profiling that was going on of the Latino community, and there was a successful suit brought against the sheriff of Maricopa County based on the documentation that people were able to gather. And so that underscores when safe, when comfortable, to document. And those of us who have the security of of our citizenship, I think, can take somewhat greater risk, even though the law should apply equally across the way. But going back to this question, I'm going to read it. This comes from Osman. Suffolk County Executive stated recently that local police will not directly cooperate with ICE unless they have judicial warrants. However, we continue hearing from Latin immigrants that they are being racially profiled by local police. What should our community do if they are racially profiled by the police?
I'll jump into that a little bit. I mean, I think there can be a difference between knowing certain things to be true and factual and feeling a certain thing. I'm not going to disconnect the feeling of a thing from value. These are moments where if we are being pulled over and we don't know why, it's a moment right now for all of law enforcement that is not profiling to be able to be clear and use all of their tools. If we have language line on phones. At this moment, all law enforcement should be doing everything they can to sort of de-escalate a situation. People have so much to lose and they've got, they're going to be worried about things, anxietal, depressed, worried about their children. We're going to need all of law enforcement, for whatever stop it might be, to utilize every tool that they've learned in communication, de-escalating, calming someone down, the way you use your body, and to make sure that in that moment, that all of the reasons why you're pulling someone over are clearly understood. It's one thing to say something very quickly, blah, 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 and another thing to make sure the person that you're speaking with, as long as everyone's safe, you're not on the side of a highway with trucks roaring by or a car accident, as long as you're safe, to make sure that you are actively engaging in communication with someone so that they know they were pulled over because they were speeding, or they were pulled over because they're doing a stop. Someone just called me today. They were pulled over and they got a ticket for expired inspection. There's an expired inspection ticket on that window. I know that that's why they got the ticket. There might be other scenarios where the pretext for that stop is something that you do want to question. And that is absolutely yours to question. Organizations like OLA have done certain studies before Greenlight New York was put in place to try to understand the difference between the pretext for stops and the mounting tickets that were building up for 509s and 511s, which were driving without licenses. And the fact that if you had too many of those 511s, it could be a reason why you went to the county jail. And that was a very scary moment for us, because at that moment there was a lot of interaction between ICE and our county jail. So having the feeling that something like that is happening is still valuable, but then there are ways to kind of question and find out really what that stop was all about. Working with an organization like OLA is good because we're out here locally, and we will go directly to the source. We will find out more about that stop, understand that stop, speak directly to the chief, understand the value, I think, of also these smaller police departments is they are often pretty responsive to us and even to other people, but definitely when we're working together, we work very respectfully, but we might dig into that. Why did that stop happen? What else was going on? And because in that, it's not for OLA to try to fight that out, but it's to make sure that that person who is pulled over might understand, wait a minute, my taillight is out. Or, yes, I do have a suspended license. Or, yeah, sometimes there's a lot of reality to what that pullover is all about, but it's also okay to question it. That's okay. That is your right as a human being. That is your right as a person, a member of our society. And nobody should be getting angry at you or saying disparaging things because you're asking those questions. During a traffic stop, an officer might be asking certain questions of you, and there's still going to be ways that you have to respond to those things, and that's a reality. But I think it's important to know that you can question, and you can certainly reach out to other organizations, whether it's OLA, Caresen, other organizations out here in the East End and further west in Long Island.
Do either of the other panelists have anything to add on to that? Okay. As I listen here today, it seems to me that one of the underlying themes here is that there seem to be sort of zones of safety. And we talked about being in your home, what you might do to protect yourself there. We talked a bit about the workplace from the employer's perspective. We talked a bit about schools. Minerva mentioned that with green light, which was a New York State law that was enacted, I'm not quite sure, but sometime in the late, in 2019, somewhere in there. Prior to that, people who were undocumented could not have a valid New York license. Now they can. The zone of interest, the zone of risk, it seems to me, really seems to be much higher in public spaces. And so now that people are able to drive, what can people do to protect themselves under those circumstances, if anything?
That is a really, really good question. A number of the verified, confirmed ICE encounters have been individuals who were taken into custody from their car. And it's been in those situations, those circumstances where ICE has been actually, it's a targeted encounter. They're waiting for that individual to drive by. If there's a police, if there are sirens behind you, whether it's local police, the New York State troopers, or ICE, the law in New York State is that you must pull over. That's not a question. But it's your right to ask who's pulling me over once you're, of course, in a safe location. And it's also your right to question whether or not you're free to go. It's your right to question, and of course, it's also your right to remain silent. There are also additional risks involved when someone is driving in their car and they've been pulled over by ICE. There's an issue of whether or not you should roll down your window. Yes, roll it down partly so that there can be communication. But ICE may also open the door and pull you out. Whether that's legal or not, that's a different story. It's still what happens, or what may happen. If your driver's license is requested, you show it. You show it. Whether it's a license you receive through Greenlight or through some other program, because you may be documented, you show that license. Because not showing it could cause more problems. But if you're the passenger in the car, you're not required to show anything, nor should you. They may tell you you're required to, but you're not. So don't. You may be ordered out of the car, and they're permitted to do that because of officer safety. But if that does happen, again, ask, why am I being pulled over? Who are you? Am I free to leave? ICE can also, ICE, like the police, like the local police, can search, they can pat you down. And again, the justification is officer safety. But going into your pockets, looking in your glove compartment, that can't happen without a warrant, or unless there's reasonable cause, if they actually see something. But again, it's so important to ask, who are you? Am I free to leave? And then also, I choose to remain silent. It's the same tenets.
Thank you. Thank you. Very thorough answer and practical but difficult advice in there. If I could ask, as a preventative, again, I know that the example of the taillight that's out, the example of a suspended license, should people at risk be considering those precautions? Again, I go back to Arizona. People was a constant refrain, make certain that everything is in order. Can you maybe go into some detail about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just good. That's good advice, one way or the other. I think it was pretty rare, but there was one moment, and I don't remember the police department, but it was out east, and someone got pulled over and was told that, those little plastic things that go around your license plate from like the dealer, that they were being pulled over for that reason. I don't know if it was too big, if it was obscuring some of the license numbers, but that was the reason they were given. So I think also asking that question is really important, because then you're also noting it. And when you're getting pulled over, you just kind of want to get out of that situation quickly, but to try as much as you can to note that, or if you're the passenger in the car, to note that, but having everything in order. So that's going to be your inspection. It's going to be putting that in your calendar so that you just don't forget it no matter what. Your driver's license, your insurance, kind of keeping up with if there's anything else that you might be going through, you could be going through maybe a custody battle, you could be going through something else in court, just make sure that there aren't any other warrants, maybe if you didn't get to court, or you didn't get a piece of mail. What we're seeing also from a lot of folks that live out here, because housing is so difficult to come by, you might be moving every year or within the year, and maybe your mail isn't going to you. Is it, maybe you never got to have it at your home anyway, because your landlord didn't allow you to have it at the home. You could be missing mail. This is how many people are ordered removed in absentia, because they never even got the notice from the court. Having an A number and being able to look up your information, I think it's a valid thing without, hopefully, just keep on top of what your case might be looking like at the moment. I think that's important. We did ask local law enforcement, one of the police departments out here, about license plate readers being connected up with other sort of federal databases, and they're assuring us that that's not what they're going to be responding to. Unless there's a federal warrant or a judicial warrant, there might be a place where that starts crossing over. But in terms of the very basic things that they're usually using those license plate readers for, I'm being assured that that's mostly what's happening. The other big thing for us, which you mentioned about identification, is also fingerprints. If you, knowing that if you don't have any ID on you, that law enforcement does reserve the right to fingerprint you. If it's a non-crime and they're fingerprinting you to know who you are, because they do reserve the right to do that, they are assuring me locally those fingerprints are not going to the FBI database. It's still a frightening thing for us, so we are trying to limit as much as we possibly can see what is that interaction. If it doesn't have to happen, why are we doing it? Why are we taking those chances? But I think having everything in order, as you say, Carlos, things hanging from the rear view mirror, don't have them hanging from the rear view mirror. We've had those as reasons for obstructed view for people getting pulled over, so don't have those. Tinted windows. Yes, dealers sell cars with tinted windows that are too dark. You've got to find out. That's your job. Find out what that tint should be and know that if you have it darker, you're going to get pulled over. That's another reason. Making sure that your car seats are in properly, making sure that you have your own safety belt on, making sure that you're not using your phone no matter what, even if for GPS. Don't use your phone while you're driving. Do not even look at a glass of wine and drive. Don't drink and drive, of course, period. But these are the areas that we are, certainly know are the biggest areas to go to. So, yeah.
Anybody want to add to that? I think that the message that I'm getting from this, and I'm going to say it in Spanish, if I could, it's no tenemos que ser agachados, pero sí tenemos que ser disciplinados. That means that we don't have to cower, but we do need to be disciplined. We need to watch ourselves as we go along, and that goes for everyone under all circumstances. I have a question here, and I may need Marcela to assist me with this one. Marcela? I don't see her. It's in Spanish, and I'm not quite sure I got the whole thing. I'm going to read it in Spanish, and let's see if maybe we can figure it out. Tengo a mi esposa, a mi hija, que no tiene cosa para presentarse, lleva 4 años. I'm not quite sure how to interpret that question. Does anybody have a sense? I'll repeat it. Tengo a mi esposa y a mi hija, que no tiene cosa o gozo para presentarse. Lleva 4 años aquí.
We have 4 years here. I mean, I think that the question might be what kind of documentation or immigration support, or it seems like it could be an immigration question.
I'm sorry?
It seems like it could be an immigration
It seems like an
question.
immigration question.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but I'm just not quite sure how to interpret it.
I'll take a stab at it. Okay. So there is a, for lack of a better word, a program called expedited removal. Expedited removal allows individuals to be deported without the opportunity to see a judge. It has a maximum that it is allowed to be enforced. It also hasn't really been enforced, or it has not been enforced to the maximum. The way we see it most often, the way that we've seen it, is individuals who come to the border and are then just sent away. They're turned back, they're in the United States for maybe an hour for processing, fingerprints, all of that, and then they're returned. Under the law, though, expedited removal can extend to individuals who have been here for less than 2 years. They distinguish whether or not you're caught within 100 miles of a U.S. border or you're caught anywhere outside of that 100-mile border. The result is the same. We are urging individuals, if they do not have a removal order, if you've been here for more than 2 years and you can prove it, keep those documents on you. Because it's your burden to prove. If it's ICE, it's required to prove how long you've been here, they're not going to do it. The presumption will be that you've been here for less than 2 years unless you can prove it. So we're urging people, if they have things like tax returns, of course, if you have a work permit or something else from immigration, keep it with you. But I think that's what the question's alluding to.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
It's probably all in there, but also if people are living on the East End that person asking the question, they can certainly reach out to Ola, to our office number, to see if there's any way that we can help field more of that question. And sometimes we definitely are looking to our partners, like Jessica at Caresen and other partners, but certainly know that on the East End of Long Island, you could reach out to Ola, and at 631-899-3441.
Want to repeat that?
631-899-3441.
Good. Do we have any questions right now from the audience? No, we collected it, but I just want to, as we begin to wind down and make certain we don't have any from out there. And I've sort of, I think we've covered a lot of territory. I guess I'll ask this one. I think it's been somewhat covered before, but we've heard a lot about the stepped-up activity of ICE, and also we're aware of what's going on in Nassau County with the police chief there, or the police there, announced that they're going to be cooperating with ICE under, I guess what's called the 287G program, where they'll be deputizing. All that is kind of concerning to hear. But my question, I guess, is, how at risk are we out here on the East End? And particularly given the experience that we had at the last go-around, I know that there were a number of things that happened that were visible. We have the dubious distinction of being a highly visible community in headlines constantly, and the New York Post recently talked about all the swells turning up at a town board meeting, a village meeting, to make certain that their nannies and gardeners weren't taken away. That was the most cynical possible interpretation of a town that is concerned about its residents. But going back from that, our visibility can sometimes be a curse. So I guess my question is, just given our past experience, how much are we at risk now? How much do we anticipate it may be in the near future?
I'll defer to you guys on the East End piece, but it's worth noting that it is illegal under New York state law, under something called a Francis settlement or Francis agreement, for local law enforcement to cooperate or to perform the duties of the federal enforcement. That must be repeated, and they must, and the local law enforcement, we just must tell them again and again and again. And we're doing that in Nassau. But I'll defer to you with
That
the
they
East End.
cannot be required.
That they cannot be required, no, that they're not even allowed to.
Okay. What I see from 2017 is just making sure that in sort of a fear, our local community leadership, in fear of being pointed at and seen as a target, that we went a little too far to harm our own before anyone else could.
I'm sorry?
That we went a little too far to harm our own before anyone else made us do it. So, and we are not in the same boat, and I know that people out there are going to listen to this and be like, yeah, it happened, and I need to talk about it because it happened, but we were not made by anyone to honor administrative warrants. We were not made to. We chose to. And why I think it's instructive, and I'm going to take something good from it right now in this moment that's very difficult, is that I know that I could look in the eye of every single person that would have thought in the moment that that was good, that now that we see what happened, it wasn't good. It didn't make us safer. It didn't make us healthier. It didn't build trust. It didn't help our children. It didn't do anything good for us. So here we are in this moment. And we do not have to do anything, nor should we do anything that is going to harm our community. And when laws show up, as they might, coming from these executive orders, we have to be very careful that we are not just falling down because we're so afraid that if we even look the wrong way, that we're going to be targeted. Then we'll target ourselves when we don't even have to. Let's fight for this beautiful community that we have, this peaceful community that we have, the wonderful families, what we've been building out here, and what our towns and villages and law enforcement strive to achieve. We're achieving it. We're doing it. Let's not break it.
Yeah, if I could just echo that, I think that there are many good intentions, and fortunately some laws and rules that are coming into place, but I think there are other levels of accountability that still need to occur. And if I could just add to Minerva's line about what self-inflicted wounds to a degree, and the way that can, or anticipating an action, and therefore not taking action. Not only does it lead to the breakup of a community, not only can lead to that, there are also safety consequences in terms of fear that the public may have to interact with the police, which is, of course, a constant threat. But there's also now, since 2016, 2017, liability, as we saw what happened with the Suffolk County sheriff of Suffolk County now having a judgment entered against them for, I believe it's $62 million, and for having detained people beyond the constitutionally allowed amount of time. So, you know, I feel the pain of. Okay, well, thank you. I feel the pain of our local officials. They are walking a fine line, or at least they feel they are. But I think that it's important for them to remember that line cuts a number of ways, and they can be subject themselves to liability, as well as fracturing the community, as well as rendering this community a little less safe than it would be otherwise. Sorry for that moderator's discretion taking that right now. We have another question that just popped up here, so I'm going to read this aloud as I read it. There may be a lot of so-called attorneys, but they may not be. Could you share how people can prevent scams, which is something that often happens to our immigrant communities?
This is probably my biggest pet peeve. We have individuals who purport to be attorneys. They call themselves immigration specialists, notarios. And we also have attorneys, private attorneys, who prey on the immigrant community. People have the right to know who's representing them, and they have the right to ensure that that is an attorney. And the way to do that is ask, are you an attorney? Prove it to me. All attorneys can prove it. I can pull out my admission certificates. I can also pull them up online. If someone asks me, I'll be taken back for a moment, but it's, oh, no, good, you're doing your job. You are asking, you are verifying. And if someone refuses to do that, then you leave. And if it's a private attorney, very often if it sounds too good to be true, you should also leave. Immigration is so difficult. It is so exclusive. It is not an inclusive system. It's not designed to let everybody to reside here in the United States lawfully. It's designed to keep as many people out as possible. And if you all of a sudden hear of this program that you may be eligible for, because you've been here for perhaps 10 years, or something else, leave. There's no harm in asking people for a second opinion or for a third opinion. And also importantly, and this tends to be a really, really, really big sign that something's a bit fishy, You're not given a retainer agreement. A retainer agreement is a contract between you and the representative that discusses their rights, your rights, what exactly you have hired them to do, and any payment if that is, of course, a piece of it. If they refuse to do that, leave. And if they will only take payment in cash, leave. These are the big signs. And if you're not sure if the person's a legitimate attorney, and we have seen such creativity in people who are claiming to be lawyers. We have screenshots of people who have been sent. They went to a notario, an immigration specialist, perhaps a private attorney, and then they were sent to a U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services office that was in like a strip mall. Or it was done virtually, and the gentleman's wearing a fake beard with a photo of the president behind him. They don't keep them in their office. They're in the federal buildings, and with an incorrect seal behind them. One had the watermark on it still. Thank God those individuals realized, oh, something's fishy, and they came to us. Fortunately, they realized it's fishy enough that they were taking photos. One even had an interview with an officer over Zoom. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services doesn't use Zoom, perhaps when they're speaking to each other, but not when they're conducting an interview. But we only heard from 2 individuals. I can't imagine how many more individuals taken advantage of. We've seen fake green cards, we've seen fake correspondence. They're very good at their work. But still, if something seems fishy or funny, or if you still just want a second opinion, ask for it. Go somewhere else. If my clients do it, I mean, that's their right, and I'm happy that they're doing it. Just like if we go to a doctor or a surgeon and say, you need this major surgery, you know, they're talking, you go to a different doctor, you go to another doctor. It's no different. We don't take offense at it.
Thank you. Whatever, yes.
And also if they're rushing you to make that decision, because if they're going to tell you that this is a great deal, and if you don't make this decision right now, sorry, they've got 20 other people that are waiting to take this great deal, and you've got to do it right now, leave, just as Jessica said.
And I forgot one more important piece. Very often these individuals will hand you a set of forms that are blank and tell you to sign. If your signature's on that and they have made up all the information that's on that form, because that's what happens, immigration doesn't care. You signed it. It is nearly impossible to walk that back. Their theory is you made your bed, you sleep in it. You should have and you should have known better. It is nearly impossible to fix those situations.
Thank you. We're about to start wrapping up. I have one last question that came in from the Zoom. And it is sort of a great universal point, and I'd like to extend on it a little bit. It says we should all get together with the Senate and the Latino caucus to get immigration reform. That's a wonderful dream. I wish it could happen. I've been at this business for quite a while now, and immigration reform has always been dangled as a possibility, and for some reason or another, like it hasn't happened like the last round, where it was actually bipartisan immigration reform that was being presented, and it was not in the interest of a certain presidential candidate to go forward with it, and so we haven't had it. I just had another. Okay. There was a clarification for the original question, which is, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. I just want to say, in terms of immigration reform, where we can have control these days is at the local level. I think that there is a lot. We are blessed out here on the East End, in particular in East Hampton town, with some very, very good, skilled leaders in our municipalities, in our schools, in our police. They have recently made some wonderful statements. I think that it is where we can have an impact is making certain that they live up to those statements. And I don't mean to we've discussed this already, but I think that getting involved locally, if you're feeling in despair getting involved locally around this issue is a way for allies and others to get involved. And I want to go back. There's an explanation. Okay. Please explain to my husband that I'm married. Okay. Explícale en inglés a mi esposo que solo de documentos el matrimonio no es suficiente. Nos casamos 4 meses. And the English translation is, please explain to my husband that a marriage is not enough. I think that someone is saying that that getting married is that may not get you the green card. I guess is if you married someone who's a U.S. citizen.
I got it.
that's what it may be.
There's a process. The marriage, of course, is the first piece of it. But then you need to let immigration know that you're married. You do that through a family-based petition, where you prove, 1, that the petitioner is a U.S. citizen, and 2, that the marriage is legitimate. And you can submit the green card concurrently. I really recommend that you speak to an attorney, because it's quite a process, and it will likely become a bit more complicated.
Thank you. Great advice, speaking of attorney. Other bits of advice that we've heard today is be careful as you're out there. Understand that you're more at risk in certain situations. Your privacy is very important. It is respected, whether at the place of work or in your home. Be alert. Watch for that judicial warrant. Examine those documents. If they present themselves carefully, judicial warrant is a key word there. And I'm going to, unless there are another comment from the panel, I'm going to start wrapping this up because we are at 8:26. But before we do, I put up this resource guide, links, which if you go to this, you'll find links to a lot of resources that we've referred to tonight. I urge you to do so. I hope it will be in the chat, so it's available, or a link to this will be there. And each one of these will take you into another link, and that's where you'll get much more information. I want to give thanks again, our thanks to LTV and its talented staff for hosting this evening, to Isabel Sepulveda de Scanlon for organizing it, to Lady Merced, who has disappeared into her translation booth. We thank you, lady. We miss you up here. To each of our panelists for giving generously and sharing your expertise. And most of all, to you, our brave community. If you missed any of this evening, it will be available on the LTV YouTube channel, I believe in the live section. And for now, I want to thank you. Buenas noches y no se olviden, saber es poder. Gracias.